Hey everyone, it's Mr. Bassard from Kicks Karate, and I'm here today to answer a question that I get asked pretty often, and that question is, what style of martial arts do you practice at Kicks Karate? Now, whenever someone asks me that question, my answer is, well, I learned in the United States from a Korean who learned in Japan from an Okinawan. And, sometimes I get some chuckles or, people give me a confused look, but that's really the truth. So I thought that today I would talk a little bit about our lineage, the history of Kicks Karate, and educate our students a little bit more on the type of martial arts that we are actually practicing. So in order to do that, rather than starting where we are today, I need to go back in time. So we're going to go back a couple hundred years to, let's go to the 1800s. Now, even before that, 1700s, 1600s, Japan at that time occupied Okinawa, and our martial art originates in Okinawa. So when Japan occupied them at that time, they put a ban on weapons. So the Okinawan people weren't allowed to have a sword or a long knife or anything like that. They weren't allowed to have any weapons at all. So they were allowed to have farming implements, and they developed some of those into weapons, and of course their hands and feet. So, at the time, the Japanese samurai that occupied their islands, let's just say they weren't the nicest of people, and they didn't treat the Okinawan villagers very well. So the villagers decided, hey, we have to do something about this. We have to figure out a way to protect ourselves. So they trained in secret, late at night, in secluded areas. They didn't want anybody to know what was going on. They kept it very hush-hush. And out of that training over the course of hundreds of years, the development of karate came about. And, as we, fast forward up into around the point of 1900, about 120 years ago, at that time, the relationship between Japan and Okinawa had improved quite a bit. And the Emperor of Japan invited several of the Okinawan masters to come over, do a demonstration, some seminars and things like that in front of the emperor and his key people. And they really liked what they saw. So they invited some of these Okinawan masters to come over to Japan to stay and to teach the art there. So it's kind of interesting. One of the people who was invited to go over to Japan was a gentleman by the name of Toyama Kanken. Now, Toyama Kanken is, in the martial arts, my grandfather. My teacher's name was Kiwon Kim. He's a Korean, and his instructor was Toyama Kanken. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, Toyama Kanken went over to Japan. He set up shop. He was teaching at a university there, and he had a dojo, as it was known, where he taught as well. Now, Mr. Kim was born in 1920, and around 1940, he decided to go to college in Japan. So he was, again, raised in Korea, which, interestingly enough, Japan also occupied Korea, didn't allow weapons for the Korean people, and sort of treated them like second-class citizens, just like they did to the Okinawan people many hundreds of years ago. So Mr. Kim had never seen karate. He didn't even know it existed. They were allowed to practice judo in Japan, but they weren't allowed to, or in Korea at the time, but they weren't allowed to practice any type of martial art where they were kicking or punching or anything of that nature. So when Mr. Kim finally went away to college, he told the story to us many times about how he was on campus and he was walking by the gym and he heard these yells from inside the gym and he didn't know what it was, and he went in and he saw people, sparring and kicking and punching and doing all of these things, and he heard the yells, the kias, and he said his eyes opened up bright because that was something he thought he really, really wanted to do. So he met Toyama Kanken and started training with him at Nihon University in Japan. Now, this, you have to understand, this was before World War II. This is in the early 1940s. So before World War II started, before the Korean War, before the Vietnam War, many, many years ago. Now, after he finished college and the war was over, he went back to Korea, and he was working in Korea and teaching in Korea. And then in the early 1960s, he came to the United States. He immigrated to the United States, and he came here as part of the Muda Kwan USA chairman, ambassador. And at the time, again, he didn't speak English very well. He didn't really have much experience in business or anything at that time, particularly in the United States. But he managed to start teaching at a YMCA in Washington, D.C., and then he opened a school in Silver Spring, Maryland. So that was in the 60s. Now, around 1979, a young skinny kid, teenager, came walking into his school in Silver Spring, and that was me. So myself, many of you know Master Mike Brown and Master Matt Gray. All three of us were students of Mr. Kim. Together, we trained together pretty much on a daily basis at his school in Silver Spring all through the 80s and early 90s. Unfortunately, Mr. Kim got sick in the early 90s. When I met him, he was almost 60 years old. All three of us were students of his up until he got sick, and he eventually passed away in September of 1993. Now, 1 year later, September of 1994, we opened the doors of the first Kicks Karate up in Old Town Gaithersburg, Maryland. And, as you know, we've been open there for 25 years. We've certainly had to modify and change some things. They obviously didn't have Tiny Tiger or Little Ninjas training in Okinawa or Japan or at Kim's studio in Silver Spring when we were there. They did have children's classes, but children back in those days were treated like mini adults. So they had the same expectations as they had for the adults, and it honestly wasn't a very fun place to be if you were a kid. So we definitely modified some things to really make it more child friendly, and gear the classes more to things that would be a very positive experience for children, and that's happened through the years, and we're happy about that. But I think it's important for all of our students to really understand that, Toyama Kanken was one of the founders, one of the premier Okinawan masters who went from Okinawa to Japan in that early period of the 1900s and really brought the martial arts to Japan, the martial art of karate anyway. And, for, many people, if they look at their lineage, maybe they're 10 or they're 20 or 30 on the list from that original person. I'm proud to say that, Ki-Wan Kim is my martial arts father, and Toyama Kanken is my martial arts grandfather, one of the original pioneers and the founder of Shudokan Karate. That's spelled Shudokan. So anyway, I just thought that would be interesting for everybody to know. And, all of our students, the forms that you guys practice, the techniques that you learn, those come straight from those Okinawan roots. So anyway, I hope that information was useful to you and that you find the history valuable. But that's our lineage. And anyway, I appreciate being able to share that with you today. And I hope to see you again soon. Everybody take care and have a great day.